I would just like to say that if I woke up in the morning and that though was the thing that was blasting through my window at 5 a.m., I would also want to close my eyes and pray because obviously I had done something wrong.
That's an Islamic call to prayer that is happening in Regina. And that was just the initial test. And the police put out a statement that ultimately says this is okay with the existing bylaws, they're within those bylaws, and we dismiss your concerns. And if you try doing anything, we're going to punish you for it.
Right. And they get away with that because they're actually following the letter of the city's noise abatement bylaw to the letter. I mean, Regina's bylaw has two main relevant parts: no unreasonably loud or excessive noise likely to disturb any reasonable person, and factors considered including location, zoning, time of day, duration, volume, frequency, and the nature of the activity. The amplification rule is that you need a written permit from the chief of police or delegate to use loudspeakers or amplification devices if the sound will be audible on streets or public places. Police can approve or deny at their discretion, and that's also the reason they can declare protesting the sound a hate crime, because in Regina, you're only allowed to make this song at noon on a Friday, at a time when no reasonable person could claim to be bothered by it, according to city bylaws. Yeah, that's the loophole.
Specifically, they said the Regina Police Service is aware of threats being made in relation to this practice and is in response, and enhanced police presence will be visible around Muslim places of gathering. Threats will be taken seriously, investigated under recently enhanced Canadian hate crime legislations.
Now, see, if I were the police, I wouldn't be too worried about those written threats. 10 to 15 messages saying, hey, we don't like this sound and we don't like where this country is going. We don't like where the immigration is. Those sound perfectly reasonable to me. People are just trying to absorb change. And I would be completely, not completely disregard them, definitely acknowledge them, say, hey, we hear you. But the threats I would worry about are the ones you haven't heard yet. The actions, like, the ones that lead to shooting up synagogues, the ones you never get any warning about. Those are the ones I'd be concerned with.
What's a hate crime? A criminal offense committed against a person or property motivated in whole or part by the offender's real or perceived bias, prejudice, or hate against an identifiable group. And I knew this is exactly what was going to happen when the Liberals passed their anti hate law.
Well, of course it was, because as soon as you start framing anybody who's dissenting or struggling with change as hateful, you ultimately insult their intelligence, insult their positioning, and dismiss them as irrelevant to the discourse, which is going to make people angrier and thus promote violence. So basically, what law enforcement is doing here is making sure that we're as anybody who has an issue with this is as volatile as humanly possible, which is probably not the right way to assure a population that you're on their side. For the record, I have nothing against Mario Zelaya. I like his work. He does some super valuable stuff in the policy reporting and current event space, but there are times when some of what he does come across as slightly inflammatory, maybe a tad undercooked, which is actually common in the short form creation space because it relies so heavily on instant emotional flare ups. The easiest of those being anger, but for all his faults, he is head and shoulders more accurate than Canadian legacy media. So if he's the one you're getting your news from, good news, he's not the CBC. Still a high bar, but at least it's a bar. That's a win. So when people say Mario's committed to telling the truth, you're partly correct. Most short form news is designed for truth adjacency while being emotionally engaging. This is Mario's lane, and he does an incredible job of it. So yeah, friend of the show, by the way. No hate here. I mean, even though he doesn't actually know it, definitely a friend of the show. June 27th, 2026. This is the original Comic Reporter, and do you see how easy that was? See how easy it was to identify the problem, de-escalate it, and make it digestible for people who aren't swimming in the discourse every day? I know it's hard to do in a 3-minute video, but we're going to do it here because that's kind of my lane. So we're heading into the summer now, and it's going to start to look like no one cares anymore, and that's because they actually don't. You know, they actually do not care anymore. If Regina wants to grant a noise exemption to a mosque to blast the call to prayer on a Friday afternoon for 3 minutes at a time, no one is going to care. No one cares. Well, some people will care, but those are the ones who like sending angry letters without actually knowing what the noise bylaw in Regina is. That's fine. It's fine. Everyone needs an outlet. Some people need more outlets than others. That's fine. They'll find out about the exemption through the police, I'm sure. But it's also summer. It's hot. It's nice out. It's bright, and people just want to spend time at the beach and out of the city and out on patios with their friends. They don't really want to be thinking about the finer points of the noise bylaws of the city they live in because that gets in the way of everything, of everyone enjoying the sunshine. And this is Regina. I'm not sure how much of that they get. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with enjoying the sunshine in Regina, enjoying the summertime. That's fine. That's how people are. The path of least resistance is fine, especially when the weather is nice, especially in a place like Regina, where you're dodging potholes on the way to the lake while trying to make sure you didn't forget any of your kids at home or in the car before you pass out on the towel and wake up looking like you were just sent through an incineration machine. Now you have to sit in the car all the way home while while dodging your children's hands because it's fun when dad is burnt to a crisp and you can see your fingerprints disappear. An incineration machine, and now you have to sit in the car and take all those kids home while they find great joy in imprinting their handprints on your previously pink skin that is now red and turns white every time they touch it, which, according to them, is the greatest thing ever. More important to enjoy the summer than it is to care about how loud each religion is allowed to be and at what time of day, as long as it's not, 5 a.m. And that's fine. No one is judging anyone for that. And if you are, that's perfectly fine. I won't judge you for that either. But no one, as far as I can tell, is judging anyone for that. You're just a regular citizen. I'm just a regular citizen. The only reason I know that even is a noise exemption is that law enforcement can make in Regina is because I was led to believe that the police had just decided that this mosque could simply broadcast a call to prayer whenever they wanted, which seemed a tad anti-Semitic from where I was sitting, and I had to make sure that was the case before I you know, confirmed it on a podcast. So that's how I know this is actually perfectly normal and legal. And if the mosque doesn't follow the rules, the citizens can petition the police to withdraw the exemption, which makes a whole lot more sense to me than the original story, right? Because honestly, most people don't care. My guess is people heard the call to prayer the first time and thought it might be a little loud. So they reported it to their favorite independent news source, and then no one really did the work to figure out the details and just repeated it on TikTok because that's actually what a lot of news sources do. CBC does that, TikTok news does that, YouTube news does that. That's why I don't call myself news because I do comedy, and comedy has a higher standard for accuracy than the news does because making people laugh is way easier when you're telling them facts that don't make sense rather than making stuff up because very few people can actually identify with things that are just simply made up. Now they can agree with made up facts that sound like they're right, they might be real, but they're untrue, and but they can't identify with that, which means it's probably not going to make you laugh. Therefore, it's not really comedy because the news is so good at omission and untruth without actually spoiling the narrative. It actually seems to be designed specifically to make people mad, and that's what the news is currently designed to do. It's not there to inform or to teach or to tell you the truth unless the truth can actually make you feel something. And the easiest emotion to do that with is anger. And if it doesn't, then they have to change it so that the truth or whatever truth they're trying to sell you is actually sparking anger because that again that's the easiest one to get, and I feel like that's what's happened in Regina, at least among a very small number of people there. So yeah, the law enforcement can in Regina and does about 100 times a year according to Regina Police make noise exemptions for different events and places, and the time and place depends on the event or purpose of the noise being made. Apparently, for mosques in Saskatchewan, that means being allowed to broadcast the call to prayer on a Friday afternoon for about 3 minutes. That's the allowance for calls to prayer. No conspiracy, no grand plan, not yet. Not, I mean, not yet, anyways. And no one is saying that the news can never be accurate. What we're actually saying is that the bar for accuracy in the news cycle is on the floor at the moment. Most people can look at what the news is telling them on any given day and just know that what they're hearing is probably about as close to bullshit as you can get without actually calling it complete bullshit. The news is bullshit adjacent. News commentators and shows and entertainment basically use its audience as a filter on the end of a sewer drain, and all they do is push the biggest piles of shit through the filter and see how much of it actually sticks, and then they play on the parts that didn't quite make it through. And really, that's because there is no incentive on either side of the media aisle to actually tell the truth. The truth takes work, the truth takes emotional divestment, the truth takes requirement to be accurate and fair while also being entertaining, which is very hard for most people to do, especially when the people who absorb the more political content benefit the most from consuming the takes that are most agreeable to confirming their own biases. Again, and I've said this before, people are allowed to have their biases. That's fine. But before you start sending strongly worded threatening letters to the regional police service, claiming that you might turn yourself into a problem if you hear the call to prayer again, your biases actually do start to appear as if they might actually be hate. They do. I'm not saying you're hateful, but it starts to look from the outside, like you actually must be simply having a problem with the Muslims. It starts to look like you may actually be. It starts to look like you may actually be simply having a problem with a certain demographic in your community. Listen, I know it's not that. Listen, I know it's not that, and you know it's not that, but the police don't have to care if it's not that because we're talking about a protected group. So making threats doesn't often go well for just about anyone. I'm not saying it's good, I'm just saying it is. No one accepts no one except those among the protected group who really aim to benefit from those. No one except those among the protected group who really aim to benefit from those who write those letters showing who they are so they can target those individuals with social labels that you might not care about, but law enforcement absolutely has to because of federal and provincial. Listen, I know it's not. Listen, I know that it's not that, and you know that it's not that, but the police, even if they know it's not that, they don't have to care if it's not you hating on a protected group. They don't have to care because that's a protected group. So making threats doesn't often go well for just about anyone outside of that protected group. Strongly worded letters are a bit of a risk factor here. I mean, no one really cares what you're saying except those among the protected group who really aim to benefit from those who write letters showing who they are so they can target those people inside their own communities with with social labels that you might not care about but law enforcement actually absolutely has to because of federal and provincial law. Really, if you're concerned, and I'm not going to say I am or I'm not. I'm just saying if you're concerned about this, then I'm not going to judge you, and I'm not going to judge you because we saw what happened in the UK and in Toronto. So preventing something like this from being able to escalate is a perfectly reasonable thing to want to do. But I think in this case, you probably want to do it without threatening the police or the protected class. You could simply hide behind claims that but I think in this case, you probably want to do it without threatening the police or the protected class because they can simply hide behind claims that you're, you know, biased, to use the nice word, if you do it that way by raising your voice an octave above normal, right? You don't need to yell it. Please don't yell it. That actually makes you a target. I would suggest, and this is going to sound very conspiratorial of me, but I would suggest that what you should do as a member of the Regina community is just start by recording how long the violating sound is broadcast every day. Remember, they have 3 minutes because that's the first thing they'll push, by the way. That's what happened in Toronto. The first step that these people will take is they'll try, if they're actually trying to take over, is that they will violate the length of time that they can play the offending noise for, the noise that offends you, not me, but you, right? The one you wrote in about. That'll be the first boundary. So if you can record the start to finish of the sound you don't like every Friday afternoon, then you can time how long it's playing for, and if it ever goes over the 3 minutes, then you can label the day and then take a copy of that to the police station and say, hey, I think they may have done the noise I don't like for 10 seconds too long, maybe 20 seconds too long. And since this is an evenly applied noise exemption bylaw, I think you should address it like other members, any other member of our society. I think you should address it as if they were members of the society and not, a group that I can't yell about because that would make me into a criminal. And I think that's what you should do. And let's be clear, I am aware of how Karenish this sounds, but let's also remember how effective Karens actually got at changing things, mostly because they never exceeded the legal boundaries in any way that could be considered extensive. So the best way to fight identity politics isn't by fighting the identity politics or yelling because you don't like who the law works in favor of. The best way is to watch the exception in Regina so closely that if anyone ever screws up, you're already at the police station ready to hand in your evidence that those people screwed up, and you're going to complain about it. And that's what you do. That's the way Canadians do it without all ending up sanctioned by the UN as human rights violation enjoyers. It's basically how Canadians have learned to stay out of jail, is just recording offenses and then handing them to police and saying, okay, now it's your problem and you have to do something about it. That's how it goes. I'm just saying there are ways, and you all have phones, and we can do this without threats or making trouble for the cops. It can be done. You can create pressure just by being so attentive that any actual hypocrisy becomes impossible to slide under the rug. And for the record, I never thought I would talk about procedural accountability on this channel. I never thought I would be the one who would be trying to make sure things were accurate and done correctly. This is not the lane I was trying to fill, but it actually makes sense because in the end, comedy is more about exposing facts that don't make sense and calling them out as not making sense in a way that people will hear and say, hey, wait, yeah, why are we acting this way when we could act that way and get better results? That's what we're trying to do here. And that is now apparently my lane. Not because I wanted it, not because I asked for it, not because I set out to do it, but because everyone else out here basically said, nah, I'd rather make myself look smart and just make people mad for a living. Because we don't have enough people doing that. Anyways, good night.